Shift in the legal landscape in Connecticut, the legislature there approving a measure abolishing the death penalty. The governor is expected to sign the bill sometime next week, and this will make Connecticut the 17th state to ban the death penalty. But lawmakers say it won't affect the 11 men currently on death row in that state, including 2 killers convicted of a horrifying crime. Judge Andrew Napolitano is our Fox senior judicial analyst. Lucky to have you on a case like this, Judge, because it's a complicated one.
Yes, it is, Jenna. Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens to these men on death row. We're all familiar with the story at this point of the Pettit family.
Right.
The home invasion that led to the killing of a mother and her 2 young daughters. These 2 men were found guilty of this crime and sentenced by a jury of their peers to death. So what happens to them?
Well, look, whatever you think of the death penalty, what these 2 now prisoners, now convicts, did and were convicted of was among the more horrific crimes in the modern era and one of the more death penalty appropriate crimes. The problem now confronting the legislature, or what will be confronting the government in Connecticut, is if Governor Malloy signs this, as he says he will, and the death penalty is against the public policy and against the law in the state of Connecticut, they cannot apply this death penalty to those who've already been sentenced to death.
But wait a minute, the lawmakers say they expect that the 11 people on death row will have those sentences. So,
well, then if they want the 11 people on death row to be executed, they will need to delay making the death penalty illegal in Connecticut until after those executions, because the Supreme Court of the United States has made it clear that once the death penalty is either found unconstitutional or found unlawful or against public policy or abolished, it can't be used retroactively. It can't selectively be used on those who are unpopular or whose crimes were more horrific than others.
Well, we know that executions take a long time in the system, and that there's an appeal process.
Yes.
So if they were to delay this legislation coming into effect, how long would they have to delay it to get those 11 to see their final sentence?
In Connecticut, a delay would probably take about 5 years. In California, it's 20 years between conviction and execution, because they have such a large death row population, and because the courts are very thorough in reviewing the evidence to make certain it is appropriate for the death penalty. But the state of Connecticut will be creating a legal conundrum, a quagmire for itself, if it invalidates the death penalty but says you can use it on these people nevertheless.
On just these 11. Real quick here, Judge, an editorial in the New York Times takes on the death penalty again, and we've seen this time and time again, and whether or not the death penalty should be legal or not. You've said yourself that the Supreme Court has taken it up and, made it illegal, made it legal. Do you see the Supreme Court taking up the death penalty issue again anytime in the future? No.
In fact, it's a great question, Jenna. The present Supreme Court has refused to hear many, many appeals that challenge the constitutionality of the death penalty. They will occasionally review whether or not a particular person should be executed for a particular crime, but they pretty much washed their hands of the issue of whether the death penalty violates the federal constitution. They have declared that it doesn't, and that this is a matter for each of the individual states to decide.
Very interesting, Judge. We'll see. We can only know what's happening right now with these justices.
Yes.
One has to wonder even about the future. Judge Napolitano, thank you so much as always.
Jenna, have a great weekend.
You too.